Hey guys, Charlie Murphy here. Thank you for choosing my video. We're playing yet another session of 1-2 No Limit 6 Max on Ignition. So the games are already up and running, so we'll jump right into the action. Upper right-hand table, we're going to close the action here against the min raise and the big blind here with the 8-6 suited. Against the raise, the call, then the 3-bet, we're just going to play cold 4-bet or fold, and 8-6 suited is an easy fold in that spot. Upper left-hand table, 8-7 suited just outside of standard open range for me from middle position. For right-hand table, we're going to re-steal aggressively from the small blind against the button raise first in. A 3-bet about 14-15% there in that spot, including all of our suited aces. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise first in with ace-10 from under the gun using an 18% range. Recreational player calls us in the cutoff, so we'll be range checking this board, whatever it is, out of position on the flop. Now against this squeeze here, we have the recreational player calls and the button squeezes to 30. We also have what appears to be a recreational player cold calling that squeeze, putting about a third of his stack. This is just a jam all in or fold spot. I'm probably only going to jam queens plus ace king in this particular spot. I guess maybe a hand like jacks is pretty close, but I think queens plus ace king is the way to go here. Ace 10 offsuit, I will just fold. For right-hand table, we'll raise the cutoff with pocket sevens using a 28% range. Upper left-hand table will check range out of the big blind, multi-way on that flop. Checks around, so I'm going to start stabbing at it at the turn. We do have second pair in that gut shot. Get called. I think I'm actually going to go ahead and put in a sort of thin, mergy value bet here on the river with my 4 as opposed to trying to check it down. I can get called by worse here. Upper right-hand table, the cutoff raises first in, the button calls. I'm going to go ahead and complete the small blind with, or the big blind rather, with king-queen. I guess you could squeeze this also. I think that's a bit loose. I prefer the call, but squeezing would not be bad there either. Upper left-hand table will complete the small blind against the limper with queen 4 suited and check range out of the small blind. And there against the small raise and then the re-raise in position, or the small bet and then the raise in position, we can just go ahead and fold our king-queen high. Lower left-hand table will raise the button with king 10 using a 44% range. Wild, spazzy play from that player that got there, which is good for us to see. We like to see when the fish outdraw people and have some money to splash around with. Upper left-hand table, the flop checks through. The turn is the 8, which pairs the flop's second pair. I'm going to go ahead and start jabbing at that small with my top pair. Lower right-hand table will raise middle position with king, queen suited using a 21% range. Three bet by the big blind to about a 4x size. We're going to be pretty tight in this particular spot. Just as the big blind three bets are not that aggressive, especially in these earlier formations. That said, suited broadways and mid pairs down to about pocket sixes or so are still good to call against that size. I'd four bet kings, aces, ace king suited to get in. I would probably call the play in position with hands like queens and ace king offsuit. Maybe use ace queen offsuit as the pre-flop four bet bluff. He checks to me on a board that's probably pretty bad for the pre-flop raiser and pretty good for my calling range. I'm going to go ahead and stab half pot. I do have a gut shot, two overcards, and a backdoor flush draw to bail me out in the event that he check calls. Turn is that 7 that pairs the board. I can have quad 7s. I can have 9s and 10s full. Don't really have too much in the way of trip 7s, but that said, I think I'm going to go ahead and put this hand into the barrel offline. Can use a smaller size here and set up a river jam. Against the check shove, we'll just go ahead and fold out. And I was using the hands like these gut shots here with not too many other outs because I'm not that worried about bet folding this hand. Whereas if I had a hand like some kind of strong flush draw or combo draw, betting and getting check raised all in would be pretty bad. So I think I would check those back and play the river in position along with some of my traps. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise ace-3 suited in the cutoff using a 28% range. Get 3-bet by the small blind, about a 4.5x size. We don't need to defend all of our suited aces or even all of our wheel aces. I'm going to go ahead and fold. This one's pretty close, but just outside the range of hands I would typically defend with, either against an optimal player or against the pool, which is not too bad, but slightly tighter than an optimal player should play in that particular formation. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise king-6 suited in the cutoff using a 28% range. And get 3-bet by the small blind. And against that size, we can just go ahead and fold most of our suited kings. Pretty much any non-Broadway suited king can be a fold in that spot. You know, king 10 or better, I would continue. King 9 or worse, I would fold out. Get this real large 5x open from that fishy spazzy player on the button in the upper right-hand table. Against that size, even from the big blind, I'm probably playing almost exclusively re-raise or fold. I'm not going to go ahead and start defending for a call when I'm being laid such a poor price compared to what we're typically seeing. I've never ran solves for how you optimally defend the big blind against such sizings just because I see such sizings so infrequently I haven't needed to. But I do know as that sizing gets larger and larger, you call a lot less even from the big blind. And by a 5x, I'm sure I'm calling very little, if anything, at that point. Same thing here, blind on blind, a 5x open. I'm just going to go ahead and fold my 8-9 offsuit. Because I'm in position and it's blind on blind, I probably can have some calls on that spot, but a hand like 8-9 offsuit is just going to go into my folding range. And the one player I was really targeting when I sat down at this table immediately left. We'll see if these other two seats fill in with short stacks or if these other guys show any tendencies to limp and play poorly. 2.5x open from the button. We'll defend a few offsuit connectors. I probably draw the line around 8-7, however. Actually, against the cutoff open, not the button's going to be even tighter, so this becomes even more of a clear fold. Even against a button open, that's probably still a fold just across the line of hands you want to defend with. Lower right-hand table, we're in the small blind facing a 3x open from the cutoff. We can go ahead and 3-bet pretty aggressively, about 10% here. Pocket 8s or better would be my range for pocket pairs. I think I would fold 7s or below and 3-bet 8s or better. Along with my suited broadways, ace-queen, ace-king, king-queen, a couple of wheel aces, and maybe a couple more hands like ace-9, 10-9 suited. Get you to about 10% 3-bet range in this spot. Against the 4-bet, though, we can just go ahead and fold. Upper left-hand table, got a 3x open for middle position. We can defend the big blind for a call with 6-5 suited in that spot, and we'll check range out of the big blind. Lower left-hand table, when we're 3-bet in position, we're going to be very, very tight, and we're just going to fold a hand like pocket fives. Probably need something like 8s or better to continue there. Upper left-hand table on that Jack 9-8 two-tone flop, we'll just go ahead and fold 5-6. Well, technically a gut shot. No backdoor flush draw. It's the gut shot to the low end of the straight, which would make a 4 straight on the board. That hand is effectively no draw, and we'll just go ahead and check fold it. There's no reason to continue there. We're going to go ahead and put in a squeeze against the cutoff open and a couple of cold calls on the lower left-hand table. Upper left-hand table, we're going to 3-bet the under the gun 3x open about 6%, including ace-queen offsuit from our small blind. Probably squeezing 7 or 8% in that spot with the overcallers and the pot bloating. Get called by one player in the blinds. He get checks to us on the 5-4 deuce rainbow flop. We'll go ahead and put in a small range bet. Upper left-hand table, the fishy player in the big blind cold calls our 3-bet, then the imposition player goes ahead and also comes along. We'll check range out of position. A recreational player check calls, then jams into us on that 3, putting the 4 straight out there, for which we have the low end of it. I am going to go ahead and call that down. I'm not really giving him too much credit for a 6 here, which means my ace should be good. He's got ace-7, so he's got the flush draw as well. We're chopping with him having a few outs to scoop the pot instead, but I think calling down there is the correct move, especially if we ever pick him off just spazzing with nonsense where our ace is already good, then it's a very clear call. I'm just going to keep checking. I'm handcuffed a bit by this short stack player out here. I don't really think I can do too much in the way of bluffing, so I'm just going to go ahead and try to show down my ace high or check fold it. If I was against the deeper player where I thought there was some play in the stacks, I might have started stabbing at that flop, or that pot on the turn, rather, not on the flop, but on the turn. Upper right-hand table, Queen Jack under the gun is just outside of standard open range for me, so I'll go ahead and fold it, but it's pretty close. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, we'll raise King 10 using a 45% range. Three X open from the button on the Lower left-hand table, ace-8 offsuit right on the cusp, probably just inside my calling range to defend the big blind here against the 3x button open. However, that's without accounting for the small blind cold call, at which point I'm going to get a lot tighter and fold the hands that don't have robust equity that really make nut draw type hands. So ace-8 offsuit is just going to become a fold because of the overcall as opposed to calling that through flop. Blind on blind, 3x open, 4-3 offsuit, just outside a range of hands I would defend. If you wanted to either raise that as a bluff or just call to defend, I don't hate that. To me, it's just outside the range of hands you should be defending, though. Lower right-hand table will raise Jack-King off under the gun using an 18% range. Blind on blind, lower left-hand table will also raise ace-10 offsuit using a 45% range. Get called in position in the lower right-hand table by a suspected recreational type player and then squeeze from the big blind. I'm going to be particularly tight in this formation, especially with the player behind me that could back jam or at least call in position to rob me of some of my equity in that pot. I'm going to go ahead and fold a hand like King-Jack. I think that's a very straightforward, very obvious fold here, though the real point of this spot is I would be very, very tight just because of the tight formation where the 3-bet came from, big blind versus under the gun, and then with the other player behind me that sort of handcuffs me and takes away some of my options. Normally in a big blind 3-bet versus under the gun, I would take a hand like ace-king offsuit or pocket queens and defend for a call in position. I would probably deviate most drastically in that spot because of the caller behind me by turning those hands into 4-bet get-in hands as opposed to calling the 3-bets in position. You know, to stop this player from handcuffing me by calling me in position because there's extra dead money in the pot from the overcall and the larger squeeze sizing because of the overcall. The 4-bet gets a little bit better with those hands that are kind of on the cusp between call 3-bet and 4-bet. So I think I would shift those into the 4-bet and stack off range, and I'm going to call a lot less of hands just because I can't play as clearly as I normally could because of the other player in position to me. Lower left-hand table, under the gun raises 3x. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet him from middle position with the king-queen suited. Going to use about a 7 to 8% 3-bet range in that spot. He goes ahead and calls and then checks to me on the 5-5-3 two-tone. I'm going to go ahead and range bet that small. Lower left-hand table, I'll raise Jack-Queen suited on the button using a roughly 44% range. Get 3-bet on the button to raise first in by the big blind to about a 4x size. Given this is a looser formation, I can defend a lot of hands, and a hand like Queen-Jack suited can be a very easy defend. I'm defending all suited broadways, most suited connectors and 2-gappers, my suited aces, etc., etc. Lower left-hand table, I'm going to go ahead and check back. I don't really want to start bluffing on the ace with this particular card. I could turn kings or queens that have showdown value, or I could continue bluffing on the river in the bet-check-bet line. Here we've got that gut shot, the 2 overcards in the flush draw, where it's a very easy continue even for the larger size up. Against that small river bet, that's going to be a very easy call down with the queen. Some merit to bluff raising against that size, but I'd much rather do it with a hand that does not have so much showdown value. I'd rather do that with some kind of air type hand and just try to show down my queen here. Turn is interesting in that he could have various over pairs that have me in pretty bad shape, but given that I've got that top pair, I've got the flush draw, I've got the gut shot, I've got all kinds of odds to improve, and if I ever catch him off where he's jamming some other kind of draw, which I'm now ahead of because I've also got the pair, I think folding would be a travesty. It's probably not massively profitable, but I am going to go ahead and call this down. He showed up with the overpair. Let's see if he can actually hold against my 18 outs. If Ignition lets me know, we'll find out what happens. We brick out, but I think the call down is just fine there. I need about close to 40% equity to break even on that turn, and my particular hand, assuming it's behind, but its outs are live, has 12 outs to a straight or a flush, another 5 outs to trips or 2 pairs. So I've got 17 outs, even against the overpairs, like a hand like Pocket Kings, which is some of the worst possible hands to be against. Or not necessarily the worst, but that's a hand where I'm behind. I think I'm still getting gods to call. And if I ever catch him jamming something like Ace King of Hearts, where all of a sudden I'm well ahead, folding becomes pretty bad. Lower right-hand table, we raise the cutoff first in with nines. The big blind calls and leaves into me small on the 10-6-3 two-tone. I'm going to go ahead and call with my pocket nines. On that 6 turn, I would like to check this hand back. I'd be overbetting or checking should he check to me, and I'm going to be overbetting 6x over pairs, maybe a hand like Ace-10. He leads again, this time for half pot. I'm going to continue calling with my pocket nines. Now he checks. I'm content to check and show down my nines as well. We're against Ace-3 bottom pair. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise Queen-7 suited on the button using a 44% range. Lower right-hand table, the recreational player limps the button. The small blind is gone. We'll just go ahead and check our big blind in with Queen-10. We'd be raising him up with something like a 12-13% range, but not a hand as weak as Queen-10. He checks back the flop, so I will start stabbing at the turn small. And I am going to follow through on the river. I don't expect as many folds here on the ace-high texture, but I can certainly fold out a variety of whiff draws and maybe even some smaller pair-type hands. Upper left-hand table, blind on blind. I'll raise 7-6 suited using a 45% range. Upper left-hand table, the cutoff, King 3 suited just outside a standard open range for me. I typically raise King 4 or better in a 28% raise first in range, but it's very close. Upper left-hand table, will raise Ace-7 suited from middle position using a 21% range. We'll check range to the 2 imposition players. 1 recreational player, 1 seems more like a regular on the Jack-10 deuce 2-tone board. Flop checks through. Turn is a deuce. I'm going to go ahead and start betting that small as nobody else bet the flop. Plenty to follow through on the river. I do have decent removal to the deuce in that I block some possible ace deuces. I guess ace deuce suited I don't block because ace deuce is on the board. Button calls. I'm going to go ahead and follow through on the river and turn my ace high into a bluff. Got raised, which is interesting. I guess he's repping a hand like Queen 9 primarily. He really shouldn't have too much in the way of quad deuces, jacks full, tens full, as those should be bet on the flop, most likely. Or re-raise pre-flop in most cases in the case of jacks or tens. I guess he could also have pocket eights and river the miracle 8 card. Regardless of the fact, that line is probably not very bluffy. I'm not going to start getting wacky and doing things like 3-bet bluffing all in there, especially without... I'd want to have something like a 9 in my hand so I could block the best possible straights, I would think, if I was going to do something like that. But that said, I just don't think that river raise is all that bluffy in that spot to where it justifies having much of a 3-bet bluffing range, period. Our left-hand table will raise ace-king from middle position using a 21% range. We get 3-bet in position, then cold 4-bet by the button. He's been pretty aggressive, as is the imposition player. This is a little bit close. I normally would just raise and stack off with queens plus ace king against the imposition 3-bet in this spot. It becomes a bit closer. These guys have been so aggressive, and I've got good removal. I just don't want to pass up on that dead money, so I'm going to go ahead and ship it in. But I will run into aces or kings occasionally, but they both instantly folded. You just can't start out thinking it when you have a hand like ace king pre-flop. And I mean, I wasn't particularly deep. I was only about 120, 130 blinds deep. You don't want to start getting scared and looking for monsters under the bed. That's what your bankroll is for, to absorb those hits when they just show up with aces on you. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, king 7 just outside my standard range of hands that would open, but it's very close. Upper left-hand table, I'm going to go ahead and swap out as the recreational player is left, and that's why I was there. Lower left-hand table, I'll raise queen jack from the button using a 44% range. Upper right-hand table, blind on blind, jack 8 suited is, or jack 8 offsuit is close, just outside my standard open range, but once again, you could open it, and it's not going to make that big a difference one way or the other. Get a recreational player jams all in for his last three blinds, and you get a min raise trying to isolate from a player that's playing about 100 bucks, about 50 blinds deep behind him. I'm going to go ahead and pop that up, try to isolate here with my pocket jacks. And I will be getting jacks in against this guy if he jams. I get check raised here. If I had some kind of backdoor draw, like a diamond in my hand, I would come along and continue here. Without it, I'll just go ahead and fold to the check raise. He goes ahead and calls. I get a terrible flop for jacks, the ace-queen-4 board, and we've got I guess there's plenty of money in the side pot, so there's some merit to bluffing. I'm just going to go ahead and check back my jacks, though, on that particular flop against this player and just try to move towards showdown. You know, given that there is a side pot here, it's not entirely dry, but the other player all in may discourage him from bluffing to some extent. So I'll gladly keep checking, try to showdown my jacks. We lose to the under-the-gun player with ace-jack, but we do scoop the side pot. We were against king 3 suited, so if we had any doubts about this player not being a serious regular, we can go ahead and throw those out the window right now. Given that he's playing 50 blinds deep, and then he's min-isoing and all in, and then calling that small 3-bet in position, or I guess it's technically a small 4-bet, with king 3. That's a guy we can go ahead and tag as a recreational player and look to get in pots with him and try to take advantage of his mistakes. A couple of shorter stacks just showed up at this table, so while I was about to leave, I think I'll jump back in and see if we can play a few orbits with these guys who are almost certainly recreational players. And I got this player over here limping the button. We check in the big blind against the recreational player limp, and then the small blind complete. I'll check range on that ace-5-4 two-tone. We do have the nuts with deuce 3, so we're going to go ahead and start check raising big and try to get some money in against this guy. He blasts out for pot. I will check raise him pot right back. Hope he gets overly married to an ace. Just drawing virtually dead against me. We end up taking it down on the flop, which is not what we like, but at least we pick up the pot. Recreational player limps the cutoff. I will complete the small blind with ace-8 suited and check range out of the small blind on the flop. Against that 2/3 bet on 6-4 deuce rainbow, we can go ahead and fold. The only thing that makes me lean a bit closer towards call is the fact that I do have the backdoor flush draw. However, against the 2/3 sizing multi-way, I can be very tight. If I had a hand like ace-5 or ace-3, you know, the gut shot to go with the flush draw, or the backdoor flush draw, rather, I would come along. I think I'll just go ahead and fold ace-8. Somewhat close because of the backdoor draws, but I think folding is probably the move. And I'd probably be more inclined to actually float that hand had the recreational player come along, just on the off chance I can back into the nuts. I may have a chance to get a real big pot off a player who shows himself to be not all that great. Got a squeeze situation here. Cutoff raises first in, button calls. I'm in the small blind. I have ace-jack. Ace-Jack probably a bit too light to 3-bet in that spot, so I'm going to go ahead and fold. I'd be squeezing 10, 11% here, and Ace-Jack offsuit just outside the range of hands I'd 3-bet with. I would 3-bet with hands like Ace-Queen off, King-Queen off, but fold the Ace-Jack, so that's kind of right on the line. Pretty close, but right on the line for me. Raise sevens from the cutoff in the lower left-hand table using a 28% range. Get 3-bet by the big blind, but to a small size. Against that small size, because the price is so much better, we can continue with a lot more hands. And the mid-pocket pairs are the exact kind of hands you add into that range. Normally, when the big blind 3-bets here, Reg, if they go about 4x, I could defend with pocket sevens anyway. But against that smaller size, I'm going to probably start defending all my pocket pairs and most, if not all, of my suited connectors. That said, it's a pretty trivial call here for that size in this formation. So we'll go ahead and make the call with pocket sevens. And goes ahead and bets 2/3 on the monotone flop, and that's just going to become an easy fold for pocket sevens, no club. I think against that size, now I would even fold pocket sevens with the club. You probably should be checking range on that particular board after 3-betting pre-flop. You don't want to do that a ton, but those monotone flops seem to be spots where you're not supposed to be betting a whole lot, and you can probably just simplify to a range check in most cases. So when he bets and bets for a large size on the board, you shouldn't be betting very often and don't need to be betting very often. I'm just going to go ahead and be very cautious in a very marginal hand, like third pair, a pocket pair worse than first and second pair with no backdoor club, with no club draw or any kind of backdoor draws on a monotone flop. It's just a trivial fold at that point. A 3x open from the button, the small blind calls. We'll just fold 9-7 offsuit in that spot. Recreational player limps will isolate from the button with ace-9 suited. Use something like a cutoff 28% raise first in range for an isolation range against one limper from the button. Lower left-hand table, king-6 option, a little bit too loose to open blind on blind. I'd probably open king-8 or better. Upper right-hand table, recreational player limps the button. I will check in from the big blind. Upper left-hand table, he calls after the isolation raise, then checks on 10-3, 3-2 tone, so I'll go ahead and range bet small. I will go ahead on the upper right-hand table and check call a half-pot bet with my gut shot. The recreational player check calls, then leads into me for pot on that flush closing turn, of which I have no real piece of, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold. And against the second barrel in the upper right-hand table, I will now fold my gut shot. Lower left-hand table, we get called by the big blind. I will range bet small on 9-9-5 two-tone. I do have the pair and that backdoor flush draw. So this is a pretty good, actually, hand to float with because I block fives full. I guess I block some combos of the ace-9 offsuit, and I do have the backdoor heart draw. And he uses a pretty small check raise size, only about half pot. So we're going to just go ahead and float that. He continues betting for a large size. I can still have all my traps in here, like all my 9x, my 5s full. I didn't pick up equity on that offsuit deuce. I'm just going to go ahead and fold. I don't really believe for sure that the guy's got all that strong a range, at least not on the flop. The turnover bet may trend a bit more towards value. But we just don't know too much about this particular player other than he's shown some propensity for aggression. He had that cold 4 bet that we got our jam through on. But the flop is a very easy and very trivial check raise for the or float against the check raise for the reasons that I discussed. Recreational player limps, get an isolation from the middle position player. I'm just going to go ahead and fold my 6-7 suited. 6-7 suited, had this player not ISO'd himself, is probably a bit outside of standard isolation range for me. However, because this guy is so loose, fishy, playing in a full stack, limping lots of hands, I was probably going to go after him with that spot had he received the opportunity, had the other player not beat me to it. Upper left-hand table, we get a button limps about on a half stack. We check in the big blind. We get a bottom 2 pair on ace queen 5 flop. I'm going to go ahead and check raise this and just try to get stacks in against some kind of marginal ace that can't get away from it, especially only 50 blinds deep. I don't think that's really all that controversial a move to treat that like the nuts in that spot. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise the cutoff first in with ace-queen using a 28% range. Upper right-hand table, raise middle position with queen-jack offsuit using a 21% range. Big blind calls us, and we're going to go ahead and range bet small on the jack 6-5 monotone flop. In the lower right-hand table, we get check 2 by the big blind. We're going to range bet small on the on the 10-10-4 two-tone board. Upper left-hand table, middle position raises 2.5x. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet from the cutoff with ace-king, using about a 10% 3-bet range there. Lower right-hand table on the turn, he check calls us, and then checks again. We get an offsuit 7 on the turn. I'm going to go ahead and check back the ace-queen. This has some showdown value, or I can value better bluff catch had I peel those cards. I'd be overbetting or checking the hands I'm continuing to bet with. My overbet hands are going to be like 7's full, 4's full, most of my good 10x type hands in various open-ended straight draws like 8-9 and 5-6 and then flush draws. When he leads into me on the river, then for 2x pot, I can just go ahead and fold my ace high. We go ahead and 3-bet. We get cold called by a fishy player, and then the raise first in player also calls. 3-handed with ace-king high on queen 9 3-tooth, and I'm just going to go ahead and check back. I'm not going to be range betting in that particular spot. Lower tables, we're going to raise pocket 9s and pocket 7s from middle position, each case using about a 21% range. On the upper left-hand table, we check back that flop. We turn the ace of hearts on the turn, giving us a double flush draw on that board. I'm going to go ahead and bet small with my top pair, top kicker. Middle position against a 3.5x in position 3-bet on that lower left-hand table. We can actually just go ahead and fold the pocket 9s. It could be very tight in that spot against the regs. Probably only defending jacks or 10s, ace-queen, king-queen suited type hands. Lower right-hand table, middle position, we face a 4x 3-bet from the big blind. We can go ahead and defend in position for a 4x 3-bet with pocket 7s. Probably go 6s or better to call that. Now the rec leads into us 12 into 77 with only 30 more behind. We've got top pair, top kicker. I'm just going to go ahead and ship the rest in on this guy, trying to get him to calm me down with any ace or maybe some janky queen or some random pair. Hand is too good to do anything. We just try to get the rest of his money in. He bets small. I'm going to go ahead and fold the pocket sevens. That's probably pretty close, but I think I can go ahead and fold it. In the upper right-hand table, we have a squeeze spot against a 3x open from the cutoff, and then the button calls. We've got ace-5 suited in the big blind. This would be the kind of hand I usually squeeze. However, given that I'm going to start bloating that pot up, I'm actually going to make my squeeze range a bit tighter just because of the 3x size and then the call-in position. I'm going to go ahead and call this one as opposed to squeezing. Squeezing would, of course, also be fine, but I think calling's a little bit better so I don't have too many squeezes that have to fold against a rejam on me kind of thing. The raising player checks. The recreational player goes ahead and mashes the pot button. I will check call with my ace-5. Now I will check the turn to him again. Turn is a 4. Counterfeits most of his aces, ace-9 and worse now. He bets half pot. This guy's been kind of wacky, aggressive from what I've seen so far. That card is not bad for me on the turn because of how it counterfeits, ace-5, ace-6 through ace-9. I'm going to go ahead and continue check calling. River also not too bad for me. Counterfeits pretty much all of his aces. Oh, his ace-10 really should have tried to value bet me there, but didn't. Lower left-hand table, we're going to open Queen-5 suited on the button, using a 44% range. We're in the cutoff on the lower left-hand table against a posting player. We're going to go ahead and isolate up against that post and then check with the King-10 offsuit. I use something like my middle position 21% raise first in range in this particular spot. Upper left-hand table, we checked in from the big blind against a limper. The flop checks through. We're going to start jabbing the turn with our gut shot, follow through on the rivers, whether we hit or miss. We miss. We'll continue my bluffing, not trying to show down my queen high and turn that into a bluff. He made 2 pair and called me down, which was a fine way to play. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind against the 3x. I will defend for a call with ace-jack offsuit. We flop gin on the king, queen, 10 two-tone flop. He checks to me, so I will go ahead and stab for half pot. Check calls. Turn is the jack. I'm trying to decide what sort of sizing I want to use here. I'm really only betting ace-x for value. I'm going to be pretty polarized here, so I think I can go ahead and use an overbet or check size in this spot. Could have some spade draws here as well. Better doing that. That's pretty much my only draws. You really can't have a straight draw on that particular board. Upper right-hand table, we'll raise queen 9 suited out of the gun using an 18% range. Suspected recreational player calls me in position from middle position. We also get called by a recreational player out of the small blind because we are out of position in a multi-way pot. I'm just going to go ahead and check range. It is a pretty good board for our hand with top and bottom pair on the queen 10-9 rainbow flop. It checks through. The turn is the king of diamonds, putting a 4 straight out there as well as a backdoor flush draw. My hand is no longer that strong. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and jab at it small, though. It called in position. River is a lousy river for us, as now any king X beats us as well. I'm just going to go ahead and try to show this down at this point and probably fold any sort of bet. Yeah, against that bet size, and I can just go ahead and fold. There really just isn't a whole lot in the way of bluffs left in his range at that point. Upper right-hand table, blind on blind. I'll raise 9-8 suited using the 45% range. Upper left-hand table against that large 5.5x button up from a short stack. I'm just going to really be playing jam or fold against that size. I'm not going to be calling a whole lot of hands against that ace-8. I'll just go ahead and fold. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise the button with Queen 9 using a 44% range. Big blind comes along, and we're going to go ahead and range bet small after he checks to us on the King Jack Jack rainbow board. Lower left-hand table and the big blind facing a 3x open from the button. We're going to 3-bet that very aggressively, about 15%, including Jack 10 suited and all of our other suited Broadway cards. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, we'll raise Ace-Jack using a 45% range. We get called, and we'll check range on the Ace-Jack 7 two-tone flop. He checks back the flop, so we'll start jabbing small at the turn with our top two. He calls. River is the queen. On that particular board, there's some straights possible out there, and I also blocked the best call-down type hands with the Ace-X in my hand. So I'm not going to overbet, but I am going to bet this for value, using more 2/3 standard type size. New table looks promising with short stacks galore, multi-way pot, so there was some limping going on. Multi-way pot with $11 in it, mean those guys were not raising pre-flop to get them all in there. Upper right-hand table will raise under the gun with Ace-8 suited using an 18% range. I guess the in-position 3-bet will be very, very tight, and we'll go ahead and fold a hand like Ace-8 suited. Upper left-hand table, we have a squeeze situation from the small blind after the middle position raises first in and the cutoff comes along for the call. Probably squeeze 8 to 9% here. Something like pocket eights or better suited broadways, ace queen plus, maybe a couple of wheel aces like ace 5, ace 4, somewhere in that range. Pocket aces, of course, we're going to go ahead and happily re-raise. We get back jammed on, and of course we call off. That's about as easy a way to play this as we could ask for. We're up against nines, and we get a pretty good run out until the river when he spikes on us. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. We're happy to get the money all in pre-flop with aces against pocket nines for sure. Don't really call too much in position. Pocket sixes on the button with the recreational play out. There's the kind of spot where you'd go for it. If the price was cheaper, I think I would do it. Against the 3x open, I'm really not calling much of anything at all. The rake just chews it up too badly. Of course, I would have hit that third six on that particular spot, but we're not going to be results-oriented. Just like on the last hand, we're not going to be results-oriented. We're going to go ahead and play a solid strategy and not worry about what the particular cards were on that particular hand. Lower right-hand table, we open from the cutoff. We get 3x or 3-bet about 3.5x by an in-position player. We're not going to call too much. However, pocket nines are the kind of hands that we can call here, especially against a reg. So we'll go ahead and defend for a call. We'll also have some suited Broadway type cards like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, king queen, king jack. And against that small bet, I will go ahead and check call once with the nines. And he checks through. I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a bluff, not having a diamond in my hand. So I'm going to go ahead and blast out for pot. Not going to work against kings with the diamond, but will work against overpairs without the diamond. Upper right-hand table, we'll raise king jack from the button using a 44% range. Small blind calls. Get a queen 9-4 two-tone flop. I'm going to go ahead and range bet small after he checks to me. Turn is the 5. I'm going to be using overbet or check sizing on that particular board, given the way we got here. I would expect the stronger hands to be raised either pre-flop or on the flop. I'd be putting my open-ended straight draws like 6-7, jack 10 into the overbet line as a semi-bluff, and also some gut shots. The ones with the clubbed flush draw blocker are good candidates to start choosing first. So I will go ahead and overbet with this particular combo of king jack. I would check back some other ones. Lower right-hand table will raise jack 10 from the cutoff using a 28% range, and upper left-hand table will raise ace queen from the button using a 44% range. Upper left-hand table, we get an 8-7-3 rainbow flop, and the big blind checks to us, so we'll go ahead and range bet small. We get check raised, don't really have too much in the way of backdoor draws or necessarily even great removal to bluffs. Not all that much short on value, so we'll just go ahead and fold against the check raise. Lower right-hand table, when we're 3-bet in position, we'll just fold a middling hand like jack 10 offsuit. Upper left-hand table, a recreational player limps under the gun. I will isolate from middle position with something like my under the gun raise first in range, about 18%, including my suited aces like ace-3 of clubs. Everyone else folds except for the limper. We get a 6-5 deuce rainbow board. I will go ahead and range bet him small. I do have a gut shot and an overcard to bail me out if he comes along. Upper right-hand table, apparently a recreational player open limps the button. I will go ahead and check in from the big blind with my queen 10. Flop checks through. I've got two pair, queen 10 on queen jack 4-10 two-tone board. So I'm going to go ahead and bet for value on the turn and go ahead and continue betting for value on the river. Upper left-hand table, I can close the action, the big blind against a raise and a call for a 2.5x with king jack offsuit. Kind of on the cusp of what I would call with there in that particular spot, but I think it's just fine. Now we get raised on the button. I don't really think recreational players have a significant bluff raising range in that particular spot, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold my two pair. Upper left-hand table, the flop checks through. I'm going to go ahead and start jabbing at it, trying to pick up that pot, planning to follow through on the river if nobody comes along on the or if we get called on the turn. The recreational player did show a straight that he had made over there. I got called in two spots, so I'll just go ahead and surrender as we're still multi-way on the river with my king high. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind. I will raise the ace-10 suited first in, using a 45% range. You get raised 3x by the big blind. This is a spot where the player tends to be pretty aggressive, especially the regular type players. So we can actually defend quite a bit here despite being out of position. I'm going to call with pretty much all my suited aces. Might turn some of them into 4-bet bluffs. We'll check range to the betting player, the 3-betting player on the queen jack deuce two-tone board. He goes ahead and checks back. Turn is the 10. I don't really fold out too much better by jabbing at this turn small. I'm going to continue checking. There might be some merit to betting the turn small just to make my range easy to play, but I think I'll just go ahead and check. He checks again. I don't see too much merit in trying to fold out better. I'm not going to get called by a ton of worse. I think I'm just going to check and hope he decides to stab the river as a bluff and try to pick it off. You know, I could also be against a queen X or a king X that checked all the way back, but I think the way I played it's pretty reasonable. 2.5x open from the button, the lower right-hand table, along with the small blind calling. Small blind seems fishy. This is pretty close. I think I can go ahead and call that, but it is pretty close one way or the other. I'll check range to the in-position player on that 744 rainbow board. In-position player continuation bet small on the small blind calls. I'll just fold and get out of the way with my 10 high. And the 3-betting player had 10-5 suited, which doesn't necessarily mean he's a fish, even though that is kind of a weird hand to see in the 3-bet range. A lot of solver-approved pre-flop ranges, blind on blind, will have all sorts of smattering of janky suited and even offsuit hands in there. So if he is trying to, or perhaps even successfully approximating that, a hand like that could often be in a 3-bet range, blind on blind. So even though that is a weird hand to see 3-bet, it isn't necessarily wrong in this blind on blind context. So we're not going to go ahead and tag him as a fish based on that. If anything, I think he's probably a regular type player based on what I've seen so far, just 3-betting aggressively blind on blind and playing full stacked. But we won't jump to any conclusions one way or the other until we get a bit more information on this guy. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise the button with jacks using a 44% range. We get 3-bet to about 4x by the big blind. We're obviously going to be continuing here. I think really it's better to continue for a call here, even against a solver-approved, wildly aggressive big button versus big blind 3-bet range. Against the pool, it's a bit tighter. I think it slants even more towards a call, but we're obviously not folding that. We obviously want to be continuing. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise the middle position, raise first in with king-queen offsuit, probably 3-betting about 10% there. Lower right-hand table against the check on the 6-4-3, I'm going to go ahead and stab for half pot. Now this guy is cold called a 3-bet in position. I'm starting to more inclined to think he's a recreational player based on that. Multi-way at the 3-bet pot, out of position. I'm just going to go ahead and check my range. I'm not going to bet or value bet or bluff anything like that on this 9-8-5 with a couple of players in position. The flop checks through. I will start stabbing at this if nobody bets again. I could have 9s full, I can have my overpairs. It may not look real credible, but these guys also probably aren't very strong given that nobody's bet at this yet. Get called in position. Folds out. River is the 10. I'm going to follow through, not trying to show down my king high. I'll bluff for about 2/3 a pot here. Can bluff out bricked flush draws, stuff like that, maybe some marginal pairs. However, a hand like 5-6 snap calls me. I think I've seen enough to put this guy in the recreational player territory now, given that he cold called that 3-bet pre-flop and then snap called with that very weak bluff catcher in that spot. Although I'm fish tagging him, but he's got my money, so the joke's really on me, I suppose. Lower right-hand table, raise ace-queen suited under the gun using an 18% range. We get 3-bet in position, 3.5x size. I'm going to be pretty tight with my calling to continue in that spot, assuming that it folds back around to me. That said, hands like ace, queen, king, queen suited, and jacks and tens are the kind of hands I would be calling with there. You can 4-bet queens plus ace, king to get them in, and maybe use a hand like ace, queen offsuit as your bluffing combo. Ace, queen suited will defend for the call. We will check range to the in position player. He goes ahead and bets. He bets about 60% of pot. Going to go ahead and just 3-bet my top pair, top kicker, and get this in. Against the min raise, pocket nines, we can go ahead and call for a flat out of the big blind, but it's pretty close. Turn is a nice brick card. The only thing I'm really worried about would be a hand like pocket tens or the overpairs. I guess he could also have. That said, this top pair, top kicker, too strong to do anything but get it in. I could also have, some flush draw type combos. In reality, I've got the queen X with my flush draw here, based on what I was calling with pre-flop, but I don't expect him to know that. I could be perceived as having various hands like King Jack, especially with flush draws, various other ace high flush draws that don't have a pair. I'm going to go ahead and actually sort of get a little bit mergy for value here with the nines, try to get called by 8x, 7x. This guy's just snapped me off with silly stuff before, so I think it's probably reasonable to do. Lower right-hand table, 2.5x open from middle position. We can defend the big blind for a call with King Jack offsuit. I will, however, be checking and then folding on that 9-8-3 monotone board when I have no diamond. Upper right-hand table, a recreational player limps under the gun. I will isolate from the cutoff with something like my middle position raise first in range, a 21% range. The pocket kings, of course, near the tippy top of that. Everyone else folds up, but the limper who goes ahead and calls, he checks to me, and I will range bet small on the ace-5-2 rainbow. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind. I will raise ace-9 suited first in using a 45% range. The recreational player check calls. We get a queen turn completing the rainbow. I'm going to go ahead and continue barreling. I go about 40 on this. Makes a river pot of about 110 with about 130 behind, so I'll have to go ahead and bet roughly geometric here, using overbets or check sizing on that turn. Lower left-hand table, raise the button first in with ace-5 suited using a 44% range. Big blind calls, checks to us, and we'll range bet small on the king 10-5 rainbow flop. He check calls. The turn is an 8. That's a good card for us, giving us bottom 2 pair. We can use overbet or check sizing on that particular texture. And I think I'm going to put these 2 pair that doesn't really block any of the call downs, hands like King Jack, King 9 type stuff, into the overbet line. Looking to get another value bet in the river, depending on what the river runs out as long as it's a relatively clean river card for us. Upper left-hand table, we raise the 3s on the button. We get 3-bet by the big blind to a very large size, almost 5x. That said, because of this formation is so loose, we can go ahead and defend our pocket pairs even against that little bit larger sizing. River is that ace, which puts some better 2 pairs and also completes the straight, so I'm not going to try to get value on this. I'm going to check that one back. We did get nice value out of King Jack on the turn, though. 8-6-5 two-tone flop. He goes ahead and bet half pot, and I will just fold my underpair there. They get 3-bet in position after raising Jack-10 suited from the middle position spot, raising about a 21% raise first in range. When we get 3-bet from middle position by an in-position player, even though it's a little bit less than 3x, I'm going to be awfully tight. I'm going to go ahead and fold a lot of my suited Broadway cards like Jack-10. Exploit him by having a reasonably tight, well-constructed range for my raise first in spot, and then 4-bet pretty aggressively to stack off with queens plus ace-king, and also have 4-bet bluffs in there as well, just so I can't be exploited by a player that's 3-betting too wacky and recklessly. Upper right-hand table, the recreational player limps the big blind, the flop checks through, so I start jabbing at that turn small on the Jack-8-8-7 two-tone board. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind against a 3x open. A hand like Queen-Jack offsuit, it's going to be firmly in the call range for me. Lower right-hand table, I'll raise Queen-5 suited first in from the button using a 44% range. Lower left-hand table, he continuation bets about 2/3. I do have overcards and a backdoor heart draw, but those are some pretty weak backdoor draws for a 2/3 sizing, so I'll just go ahead and check fold. Or fold, rather, as opposed to check fold. Upper left-hand table, blind on blind, we'll raise pocket threes using a 45% range. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise king 8 on the button using a 44% range. That's right around the cusp. That's probably the worst offsuit king I would raise first in this spot. For left-hand table, we'll raise the button with Jack 9 offsuit using a 44% range. Blind on blind, lower right-hand table. Face a 3x raise. We're going to 3-bet 17, 18% here, including all of our suited Broadway cards like Ace-10. Probably raise 9s or better, Ace-Queen plus. Suited connectors 5-4 or better. Then a smattering of suited and offsuit hands. The offsuit hand's not quite good enough to call with, and just a random smattering of suited cards, as all the suited cards are good enough to call with blind on blind for a 3x. Button raises 2.5x. We'll 3-bet from the small blind. About a 15% range, including Ace-Queen offsuit. He calls. We get a King-King-3 two-tone flop. We'll go ahead and range bet small. Calls. Turn is the 5 of clubs. I could keep betting for value with 5s full, various King X. I wouldn't really have pocket 3s, but I could have some various flush draws. I could have hands like Ace-4 and Ace-Deuce of clubs for combo draws, or even without the flush draw, those could still be barreled in some cases. Ace-Queen offsuit, I think I'll just go ahead and check. If I can peel an ace or a queen here, I can either value bet or bluff catch. I think I'd rather be continuing to bluff with hands with a bit more robust equity. Or better blockers. I guess a hand like Queen Jack that has no showdown value but blocks a lot of his best King X pre-flop calls would be not a bad hand to put into the triple offline. I think Ace-Queen I can just go ahead and check. I hate folding against that small size, but I think it's probably a better play than anything else. So I will go ahead and fold there. Lower right-hand table will raise Ace-5 suited from middle position using a 21% range. can defend this min raise from under the gun against a kind of weak spazzy player with 9-7 offsuit. We'll however check fold on queen queen 3, two-tone. We have no piece and no backdoor. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise king 5 suited from the cutoff using the 28% range. Upper right-hand table, recreational player limps the cutoff. I'm going to go ahead and isolate from the big blinds with something like a 13% range, of course, including pocket kings. Use a larger sizing to raise out of the blinds, about 150% of pots. So we're going to pop that up to 11. He limp calls. We get a 7-5-4 rainbow flop, and I'm going to go ahead and put in a small range bet. He quickly calls. Turn is the ace, putting the backdoor flush draw out there. That's one of the worst cards for me, other than, you know, the eights, threes, sixes type thing that put a 4 straight out there. I'm going to go ahead and slow down. He bets half pot. I will check call with my kings and check the river to him on that jack. He checks back, and my pocket kings are good against pocket sixes. Normally be shutting down my session about now, but at the moment I seem to have some pretty good tables up, so I'm going to let this ride a little bit longer. If I start getting tired or if my tables really start to break, then perhaps I will shut down, but we'll keep going for a little bit at the moment. Upper left-hand table, middle position raises first in. From the small blind, I would 3-bet him about 8 or 9%, but not quite as loose as ace-jack offsuit. I think that should be a fold. If you really want to be 3-betting ace-queen, ace-king, maybe pocket eights or better, suited broadways, and a few wheel aces. Something like that's appropriate. You start putting ace-jack, king-queen in there, you might have a few too many combos. Pretty close, though. Get a 2.5x open from the button on the lower left-hand table. Usually that would be a very standard defense. However, this guy's been awfully tight and passive. I'm going to use a little bit tighter range. I'm just going to essentially treat this like he's raising first in from the cutoff as opposed to the button. Ace-5 offsuit kind of on the cusp. Still okay to defend with there. So the end result is I'm calling, but I'm not going to have nearly as much ace-x in my range as I otherwise would because this guy's been on the tight passive side so far. He goes ahead and bets small. I'm going to go ahead and check raise this. I think it's going to be pretty hard for him to have hands that can continue. Go ahead and pop that up to about 13. That should be about 60% of pot. It's hard for him to have too much king X. I do block ace king. It's the best possible king X. He probably is just range betting when he uses that small size. I'm just going to get it through so often. And I do have outs to that wheel straight as well on the 4. So I think that's a fine hand to check raise with in that scenario. Upper right-hand table, we checked in the big blind against under the gun limper. We check call the min bet on the flop on ace-7-5, and then we check the turn again, having made 2 pair with the king, and we face another min bet. I'm going to go ahead and check raise that, try to get some value from ace-x here. And also plan to value bet if he calls this on most rivers. Upper left-hand table, raise ace-queen suited under the gun using an 18% range. We get min raised by a 60 blind stack, or $60 30 blind stack. Against that size, we really can't contemplate folding much of anything, especially on a hand like ace-queen suited. So that's very clearly going to be in the call range. I don't want to jam back over the top and just let him fold out too much stuff that we beat. We'll go ahead and we'll stab at this guy. I think we'll put him on the installment plan, try to put him over 3 streets here. So we'll use that small flop bet 1/3. He check calls. Upper right-hand table, get a recreational player limp, so I'll isolate out of the small blind with ace-10 offsuit. Now he goes and overbet jams into me on that queen. Closes the flush, but it also makes me top 2 pair. I've just got to go ahead and call that down. We're against pocket 10s with the heart. He finds a way to spike one of his outs, but we got our money in good, which is what we care about. Upper right-hand table, the rec limp calls. We'll go ahead and range bet him small on that ace-4-3 rainbow flop. Turn is the 7 of spades, putting the backdoor flush draw out there. We have no piece of that, so we're just going to go ahead and start checking, probably check fold. However, he checks back the turn. River is an ace. It closes the flush, but also gives us top pair, so we're going to go ahead and stab at this, try to get value. I'd also be bluffing here with my stuff like king 10 that's got no piece of that, try to fold him off some marginal pair. I was going to isolate the under-the-gun limper, but the middle position player beat me to it, so I'll fold my jack 10. Upper left-hand table will raise queen 9 from the button using the 44% range. Lower left-hand table, we will defend the big blind for a 2.5x open from middle position with our pocket 6s. Against that 3-bet from the short stack, we can just go ahead and fold the queen 9 offsuit. And against that half-pot bet after we checked on the 10-8-7 two-tone, we'll go ahead and fold the pocket 6s. Upper left-hand table will raise king 7 suited first in from the cutoff using a 28% range. Suspected recreational player quickly calls the button on me. I will go ahead and check range to the in-position player on the 9 jack deuce two-tone board. He goes ahead and bets 2/3. I'm going to check call once with my flush draw on my overcard. Continue checking to him. Turn is the 7, giving me a pair. Now he goes ahead and checks back. River is the 10 of hearts, putting the 4 straight out there and also closes the flush, gives me the second nuts. I think I just want to go ahead and overbet all in, slightly more than 2x, trying to get hero called down by some kind of straight or 2-pair hand. Upper right-hand table, I'll raise king 9 suited from middle position using a 21% range. He is not instantly folded. That's a good sign. I've got a chance to get called down here. Upper right-hand table got called by recreational players both in position and from the small blind. We did get called down, so we just came up with our king 7 flush. I'm going to go ahead and check range. Well, I was going to check range until I got let into. Now I'll just fold when I get let into half pot with my... I do have a backdoor flush draw and overcard, some backdoor gut shot type hands, but I think I can just go ahead and fold that one. He was sitting on king 8, so he did in fact make the straight there. That he had the 8 on that 4 straight run out. And a lot of times the recreational players are not going to be all that, they're going to be pretty inelastic based on the bet size. He's calling with his 8x there, whether I jam for 2x plus pot or whether I bet him half pot or 2/3. Ergo, when you have a real strong hand against a recreational player, bet big, because if they're calling, they're calling. Middle position raises 3x the upper right-hand table. I'll defend from my big blind with pocket 4s and check to him. Lower left-hand table, we get called by the big blind. I'll go ahead and range bet small on the ace-king-deuce two-tone board. I will check fold for the half bet with pocket fours on the upper right-hand table. That's pretty close, but I think I want to check fold that one. We get called on that ace-king-deuce two-tone board by the big blind. I'm going to go ahead and check back my king-queen now for the second pair. River is the jack of diamonds. I'm not sure that this hand is good enough to call down with. Upper right-hand table, recreational player limps will isolate from the small blind with king-jack offsuit towards the bottom of my isolation range here. Against that sizing, pretty sure I can just go ahead and call. It's probably an ace-x type hand, but I think I'd rather do that than bluff raise. Continue barreling on that turn with my gut shot and my nut flush draw against the recreational player on the upper right-hand table. He calls, river is the queen, gives me, I could lose to flushes or I could be losing to boats. However, I think I can still get hero called by weaker hands in this spot. It's only a little more than pot the way we set this up, so I'm just going to go ahead and jam all in with my Broadway straight, try to get hero called by 10x, ace-x. He calls, and our straight is good. I'm glad I stuck around and played a few more orbits here because I found a chance to stack some fish. He had 10-9 offsuit for turn trips on the turn, which could be tough for him to get away from, of course, so my thought process worked out, at least on that one. Lower right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and range bet small against the big blind after that check on that Jack-4 deuce two-tone flop. Turn is the queen, which is an overcard. You're going to put pressure on his various pairs that check called the flop. We also have a gut shot to the Broadway straight, and we do have a blocker to the flush draw. I'm not going to be betting all my gut shots here, but I will prioritize the ones that have a diamond to make it harder for him to have some kind of flush draw that calls. So I will put that line into the ace-10 with the 10 of diamonds into the overbet turn line, and he quickly check folds. Upper left-hand table will raise ace-10 from the cutoff using a 28% range. We have a new recreational player filling the seat of the old guy we just busted. He comes along for a call, and I will check range to him on the Jack-5-3 two-tone flop. He checks back. The turn is an ace, giving us top pair. We're going to go ahead and start jabbing at that pot small on the turn. He quickly calls. River is another ace, giving us trips. I really only lose to, I guess he could have checked back ace-jack on the flop, or he could have some ace-queen or ace-king that he also called pre-flop and checked back. I really think he's going to call me with any ace-x here, though, however, as well as maybe just hero call with some weaker nonsense, some jack-x pairs. I'm going to go ahead and overbet, try to get some big value out of my trips. Upper right-hand table, the rec limps the button. We'll check in with 10-7 suited. The flop checks through, so I'll start jabbing at that turn, even though I've got total air and no real equity. He just has so much stuff that's going to check fold when he takes that fishy limp pre-flop line. And I think it's okay to just start stabbing blindly for small sizes. I don't call out of the small blind very often, but here we have a 2.5x open and a recreational player comes along for the call. The big blind behind me is another fishy player who has been very passive, not prone to 3-betting. I shouldn't get squeezed off this very often. I've got a hand like Pocket Fours that plays great multi-way if I can hit my set. I will do something I don't do very often. I will call pre-flop from my small blind, trying to hit my third 4. And of course, as I just explained, all the reasons why I can get away with doing something I won't normally do, the big blind decides to wake up and squeeze for a 3-bet, his first time in over 20 chances of doing so. So I will now go ahead and fold my 4s out, not throwing more money down into that pot. Upper left-hand table, recreational player limps. I will complete the small blind with ace-5 offsuit. Big blind checks in. I will check range out of my small blind. We do have a gut shot on that king-4 deuce two-tone flop. We get a pot bet stab from the limping player in position. He hasn't shown himself to be particularly aggressive so far. I'm not going to go ahead and start doing some wacky check raise stuff against a player who's been loose passive and now is sizing up on the flop. With just a gut shot. He's also on the shorter side, playing only about 60 blinds deep pre-flop. So I'm just going to go ahead and check fold that one. Smaller sizing players that are shown more aggressive, so they mean they can have more junk in their range that will bet the flop but fold to the raise kind of thing. You could go ahead and check raise with the gut shot as a semi-bluff. In that particular spot, though, I think it's better to just go ahead and check fold it. Lower left-hand table, we raise Queen-Jack offsuit from middle position using a 21% raise first in range. I get 3-bet just over 3x by an in-position player where I'm going to be very tight in response to that, so I will just go ahead and fold my Queen-Jack. And it's not even close. That's a standard fold there. Under the gun raises 2.5x. The recreational player from middle position calls. I'm going to go ahead and put in a squeeze from the button. In this particular spot, I'm probably squeezing about 8% or so. Pocket 9s are better. Most of my suited broadways, ace-queen, ace-king, king-queen offsuit, that kind of stuff. And a few wheel aces like ace-5 suited. Pocket aces, of course, the tippy top of that 3-bet squeeze range. Upper right-hand table, I'll raise the cutoff first in with ace-9 offsuit using the 28% range. The raising player folds out against the squeeze, but the recreational player comes along. We get a king-9-3 rainbow flop. Upper right-hand table, I will check range to the in-position player, multi-way on ace-king-6 two-tone. Upper left-hand table in that squeeze spot, he checks to me. I'm going to go ahead and range bet him small. The in-position recreational player bets 6 into 15. The big blind comes along for a call. I'm also going to call with my top pair. Interesting turn card that makes 2-pair for me but closes the flush on that 9 of diamonds. I will continue checking to the in-position player. He checks back. River is a great card for me. It goes running 9s to fill me up. The out-of-position player goes and he leads half pot, 16 to 32. I'm going to go ahead and put in a nice pot size raise with my full house. I beat essentially everything here. I really can't expect anybody to have kings full or aces full having not raised pre-flop, so there's no better boat, so I'm going to go ahead and put in a raise and just consider this the nuts. If I get re-raised, I'm going back all in over the top. I want every penny in this pot. After my raise, the in-position player and the leading player both fold out. Upper left-hand table will raise ace-10 from middle position using the 21% range. Lower left-hand table is pretty reg-infested at this point. I'm going to swap that one out. The other tables still have one or two wrecks. Perhaps more. This guy looks like a wreck as well, playing $172 deep new to the table. Lower left-hand table, the last hurrah on that one. We're going to go ahead and raise ace-king from the cutoff using a 28% range. Our cutoff raise first in gets 3-bet by the small blind. He goes about 4x. You could 4-bet this hand, or you could call it. It's kind of close. Against the regs that are slightly tighter than the solver would recommend they be, I think this slants slightly towards a call, but it's pretty close. I'm going to call it, but I sure don't hate 4-betting either. Just don't fold. Upper left-hand table, rec limps under the gun. I'm going to go and check in from the big blind and check range to him on the 7-7 deuce rainbow flop. He checks back, turn is the 5 of clubs, putting the backdoor flush draw out there, which I have. I'm going to start jabbing at that turn small. The reg checks the ace-high flop, ace-jack 3. I've got ace-king. I'm not too worried about this hand being beat. It's not the stone-cold nuts, but it's pretty fucking strong. So I'm going to go ahead and start stabbing for half pot. Upper right-hand tail, I'm going to follow through, keep bluffing with my ace-high, try to fold him off some kind of silly pair. It doesn't work. He goes and quickly puts in a raise, so I'll just fold my ace-high. Weird to see a reg check fold in the 3-bet pot on that ace-high board like that, but you never know what he's thinking. Who knows? Maybe he had some other kind of pocket pair, and then just when I start betting the flop, he didn't want to get involved. Not sure exactly. You'd expect regs to be betting that spot for the most part. In fact, he didn't cost me at least one bet with my ace-king, unfortunately, but hey, that's the way it goes. Upper left-hand table will raise the button first in with ace-queen using a 44% range. Upper right-hand table will check the big blind in against a couple of limpers with my 10-6. Upper left-hand table, the recreational player calls the small blind. We get a 7-5-4 two-tone flop. He checks to me. I'll go ahead and put in a small range bet, even though I'm sure that is not solver approved. He quickly calls. Upper right-hand table, the flop checks through. I'm going to start jabbing at this, see if I can steal that pot with some small bets, like using the small bet when we're multi-way. They both call me in position, so I'm just going to go ahead and surrender at that point. Upper left-hand table, turn is a board pairing card, the 5. I'm going to go ahead and check back my ace-queen high, try to get closer to showdown. Showdown against better aces with flush draws, peel an ace or a queen to value bet or bluff catch. He continues checking. I'm content to showdown my ace-queen high on the paired board. Against queen 4, I don't know that he's folding too many pairs. If I had a much weaker hand, if I had something like queen high, 10 high, I would of course bluff that river. I think as played, especially with the board pairing, so there's less cards out there that can pair up and beat the ace. I think checking back the ace queen high is just fine. But bluffing can't be too bad either. It's hard for bluffing on the river to be too bad. Upper left-hand table, recreational player limps under the gun. We have a cutoff who is a forced post, new to the table, almost certainly a recreational player playing about 40 blinds deep. He checks after posting. Small blind completes. I'm going to go ahead and isolate up out of the blinds here with my King 10 suited, using a large sizing, about 150% of pot. Lower right-hand table, get a 2.5x open blind on blind. We can defend for a call with all of our suited cards, including 10-5 suited. Lower left-hand table, get a raise from the cutoff, and then a couple of calls from the button and small blind. I'll close the action with 8-6 suited. Lower right-hand table, I will go ahead and stab for half pot. Everyone folds except the under the gun limper. We get a 10-5-5 rainbow flop. I'm going to go ahead and put in a small range bet on that board. I do have top pair. Get a pot size bet from the imposition player. I do have a gut shot in the backdoor flush draw. However, I'm just going to go ahead and fold that for the pot size bet multi-way. Turn is a great card for us, as now we have the board locked down with tens full of fives on 10-5-5-10. I'm going to go ahead and check that particular card, looking to give him a chance to start stabbing because he's probably a weak fish with all kinds of goofy nonsense in his range. So I'll go ahead and go into a check call mode here, and I will check the river again. He goes and bets half pot. I really only lose to 10-8, fives full. I don't see any reason to not go ahead and get the rest of the money in for about a 2/3 pot size after the call is included. So I'm going to go ahead and check jam all in with my 10. Hope I can get hero down by something goofy, like especially like a 5. He might have a hard time folding. And we do end up stacking him. Well, he had pocket queens, so not sure why he decided to play a limp call situation with pocket queens pre-flop, but recreational players do all kinds of things that don't make any sense, and I'm just glad to be there and benefit from it when they do. Turned it into a pretty decent session because we stuck around a bit later and got a chance to stack a few recreational players. So I'm glad the edge I thought I saw out there is actually manifested, and I'm glad I stuck around later for it to have a chance to do so. Lower left-hand table will raise ace-7 suited first in from the button, using about a 44% range. We get 3-bet for 4x from the big blind. We can defend pretty loosely in this particular position just because the players are not quite as aggressive as a solver would recommend, but pretty damn close. I can call all my suited aces in position here against a regular type player. We flop ace-ace-4, two-tone flop. I'm actually not nearly as strong as you might look here, because any trip aces I'm far behind. It's going to be hard to get 3 streets from a non-ace-x hands. I'm going to go ahead and under-rep my hand and check this particular combo back. I had ace-queen, ace-jack, ace-4, forceful, the actual best possible trip aces. I think I might go ahead and I think I might go ahead and start betting the flop there. Here with the weaker trips, it's not that vulnerable, but it isn't necessarily way behind. It could be way ahead. It could be way behind. I think it's all right to go ahead and check that back and under rep it. Now when he checks the turn again, I'm going to start trying to get some value in there. He goes ahead and check calls. River is that 5, puts a 4 straight out there. I want to give him a chance to get suspicious against me and go ahead and just calm me down like I've got some kind of busted flush draw. Trying to think. I think I'll just go ahead and blast for pot like I usually do on those 4 straight and 4 flush runouts, whether I'm bluffing or value betting. Here's a little bit of a mergy thin value bet with, decent trips. I just don't really think that he beats trips necessarily, so I'm content to go ahead and put in that bet. Try to get hero called by a suspicious pocket queens. My plan works. My hand is good. And I got hero called by king, queen, high. So I guess checking back that flop and under-repping my hand did wonders for me there. So let me pick up a very nice pot. when he was just dead to rights the entire time. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise King 4 suited from the button using a 44% range. Upper left-hand table, blind on blind, we'll raise Ace-Jack suited using a 45% range. You get called, and we'll check range to the big blind and the King 5-5 rainbow flop. He checks back. Turn is an offsuit 3. I'm going to start jabbing at that pot small now on the turn. He calls. River is the 7. I'm going to go ahead and continue bluffing, turn this hand into a bluff. I don't think this is a massively profitable spot, but I think it's a little bit better than checking to try to show down or try to figure out if I have a bluff catcher if should he bet. And he turned a pair on the river that he called down with, which I think is reasonable just because my line doesn't look all that particularly strong and I can't have a lot of air in my range there. Lower left-hand table, we get an under-the-gun open. We're in the cutoff. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet that with our ace-10 suited, using an 8 to 9% 3-bet range. Something like pocket nines or better, ace-queen, ace-king, king-queen. Most, if not all, of my suited broadways and a couple of suited wheel aces. Something like that gets you to 8 or 9%. That's a real appropriate range for an under-the-gun 2.5x open. For 3-betting an under-the-gun open. Upper left-hand table, the rec player limps the button, small blind completes. I will check in with my jack-6 suited and then check range out of my big blind. Lower left-hand table, the button raises 2.5x. I'll go ahead and defend the big blind for a call with the ace-deuce suited, and I will check range to the imposition player. Lower right-hand table, I'll raise king 10 offsuit from the cutoff first in, using a 28% range. The button uses about a 75% continuation bet here on the lower left-hand table, so I'm just going to go ahead and check call with my flush draw against that size. Continue checking. Pretty good card for me on the turn, as now I have top pair to go with the flush draw. He continues barreling, bets about 2/3, about 80% of that pot, so I'll go ahead and check call again with my top pair and my flush draw. River is a deuce, giving me aces up, so I'm going to have a real nice bluff catcher here. I'll continue checking in flow. Just trying to decide if there's any merit to bluff raising this all in. I really don't think there is, but I'm almost certain this is going to be the kind of hand I can check call down with. Just think about this for a minute before I jump to any conclusions. That size is slightly overbluffed in general. Pretty neutral, slightly overbluffed. The triple barrel trends a little bit underbluffed. Everything else seems to be about neutral. So this is a slam dunk call down, even with bluff catchers. But with a hand like ace deuce, where you can even have some value domination, you could be doing that with a hand like ace queen, ace king, ace 10 for sure. I think that's just a very easy call. He tripled off with his gut shot, which I kind of like. I don't know if I would have bet the turn with that combo. I think that's pretty close. I think I would have preferred to have a diamond in my hand to block some of the flush draws as well. I wouldn't have bet all my gut shots, so that might be where he made a mistake, if he made any. But if he is going to barrel the turn with that, and it's certainly defensible, it's certainly not a terrible play, I think you've got to go ahead and blast off on the river. You can't just be surrendering your 9 high, so I like that he continued bluffing. He just happened to run into me healing the ace, and then it's a second pair on the river for good measure. Upper right-hand table, I raise middle position first in with king jack using a 21% range. The recreational player big blind checks to me, so I'll range bet him small on the 8-7 deuce two-tone board, or rainbow board rather. He check calls, turn is a 6, putting the backdoor flush draw out there. I don't have any real draws or blockers to the draws or made hands. I'm content to go ahead and check back my 2 overcards and either bluff catch, or value bet on the river, depending on exactly what comes out. River is the ace of hearts. I've got king high. That can scare away a lot of his one pair type hands. I'm going to go ahead and put in a bet for about 2/3 on that river. Bluff with my king high, and it works. We get that one through. Under the gun, upper right-hand table, 9-8 suited, just outside a standard open range, an 18% standard open range for me, so I'll go ahead and fold that one, but very close. Upper left-hand table, we get a poster, automatic poster, who checks then after posting in the cutoff. I'm going to go ahead and isolate from my small blind about 13%. Using pocket 8s or better, any 2 suited cards that are 9 or higher, and then stuff like ace 10 plus, king queen plus kind of hands. The big blind calls, the poster folds. I'm going to go ahead and range bet him small on the 9-3-3 rainbow board. He calls, turn is the 5 of hearts. I'm going to slow down with my sort of weak top pair. I'm just going to go into a check, probably a check call down line here. He goes ahead and bets 2/3. I think that's a very standard, easy call on the turn. River, I will keep checking. River is that queen. A little bit trickier now. He could have hit the queen with some kind of overcard. That said, he doesn't really have a whole lot of 3x in his range. He's probably a regular type player. 70% is a little bit underbluffed. As the call bet line is a little bit underbluffed. That Broadway River overcard doesn't seem to make that big a difference. This is actually pretty marginal. I think it's close. I think I'm probably supposed to fold, though, even though it's hard to give him credit for too many better hands. Fold that one. Lower right-hand table, under the gun, raises min raise. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet him from the cutoff with my pocket kings. Got about a 7 to 8% range there, something like nines plus, ace queen plus, most of my suited broadways and a couple of suited wheel aces. A player behind me cold calls the 3-bet, which I find to be pretty suspect and weak in most cases. Folds back to the original raiser, who also calls. I'm out of position in a 3-bet pot that's multi-way. I'm going to go ahead and check range to the in-position player. It's ace-10-3 monotone. I've got pocket kings, but with the relevant suit in my hand. Flop checks through. Turn checks to me again. I'm going to start jabbing at this pot small now, using that small 1/3-ish type size because we're multi-way. The in-position player folds out. Under the gun player check calls. River is not the best card for me at 10, so now the second pair has turned into trips that beats me, and the ace-high stuff still beats me. I don't have a ton of stuff I can get value from here, but I do have a lot of showdown value. I'm going to be content to go ahead and check this down. We're against pocket fives with the club, so he was drawing very, very thin, even though he did have a good price to call with a pair, in that, technically he had a flush draw as well with the 5 of clubs in his hand. So we got a smidge of value out of him on the turn by using that small bet size. Upper right-hand table, I'll raise middle position under the gun with King-Jack suited, using about a 21% range. Recreational player calls me in position. We'll go ahead and check range to the in-position player on the ace-ace-6 rainbow board. We get a 3x open from the button player here on the upper left-hand table. I'm going to go ahead and re-steal that with my queen-10 suited. Going to re-steal about 15% in this particular spot, including all my suited broadways. I can check fold against the rec on ace-ace-6 against that larger size. And he bets smaller. I can float with king-high and some backdoor draws. But I think when he starts sizing up and he gets a lot of ace-x in his range, it's okay to just get out of that spot on the flop. Upper right-hand table, blind on blind, I'll raise ace-9 suited using a 45% range. Check range to the recreational player big blind on the king-jack-6 rainbow flop. He goes ahead and he bets small. I've got some backdoor draws here. I've got the backdoor flush draw. And on a card like a queen, I actually have real good removal to bluff. I'm going to go ahead and check call that one time and see what develops. That small bet does not make me feel nearly as concerned about strength. I can also bluff the river if the turn checks through. Against another small bet on the turn, I'll just go ahead and check fold now. If I pick up a queen or a 10, I've got real nice removal to the straights. You know, on a 10, I block queen 9, ace queen. You know, and on the queen, I block ace 10, 9, 10. So a queen would be a great card to go ahead and check raise bluff. When recreational players are using that small sizing, a lot of times they are doing that with being overly merged. You know, they're doing that with middle pair type hands. So if he had done that same thing, bet about a third of the pot on the flop and a third of the pot on the turn, but I had picked up a card that was better for me where I've got some real nice removal to the actual strong hands, I'm going to go ahead and put in a check raise there as a bluff. You know, the cards I was looking for was a queen or a 10. And of course, picking up spades gives me real equity, gives me, you know, draw to the nut flush there, gives me the nut flush draw. So those are the cards I'm looking for to continue, and I would be willing to bluff, even against a recreational player, though, because he's using those small sizings. You know, had I picked up one of those cards I was looking for on the turn, like the queen or the 10. Or, of course, had I peeled an ace and made ace high, you know, made a pair of aces with that ace high board, that would also be a fine hand to continue with. Upper left-hand table, the cutoff raises first in 3x. I'm going to 3-bet from the big blind about 10% with my king-queen suited. He quickly folds. Get a raise and a re-raise. I'm sitting on the big blind here with pocket nines. I'm going to treat this spot like a cold 4-bet or fold situation. I'm not going to do anything like, oh, I'm going to call with my pocket nines or my mid-pair type stuff. I'm just going to cold 4-bet or fold. Pocket nines is most likely too weak to go ahead and do anything but fold here. Let me think about it, though. It could be at the tail end of my bluffing range. Probably a little bit too loose. I probably want a cold 4-bet to stack off with pocket jacks and ace-king, and then my bluffs would be ace-queen, suited versions of ace-jack, ace-10, king-queen, king-jack, and also pocket 10s. Those are the hands that can fold if I jam back, but will play pretty well if I get called and play a called 4-bet pot. Upper left-hand table, a recreational player sitting about 20 blinds deep, limps middle position. I will isolate from the button, uses something like my cutoff raise first in range, about 28%, including queen 10. Another short stack comes along for that ISO raise out of the blinds. He's also playing short. He's about 30 blinds deep. The limper comes along and calls as well. So we're multi-way in this isolated pot. We get a 3-3-4 rainbow flop. I will not be range betting on that board because we're multi-way. I'll be checking back this combo should it check to me. Lower right-hand table, we raise the button first in with the 44% range. I've got ace-jack offsuit. The big blind comes along, checks to me, and I range bet small on king, queen, queen, rainbow. And he quickly folds. And that isolated pot with the recreational limpers, the one player leads for pot. And then the limper, that limp called, goes all in for slightly more than the bet. I'm going to get out of the way with my queen high. He calls off with his gut shot ace-5. He's against a a gut shot that's a 7-6 and then runs off 7-7 for top full house. Bang, bang, donk on donk violence. I didn't get a chance to be a part of it, but at least I got to witness. Blind on blind, the lower right-hand table got a 2.5x open. Against that size, and I can defend all kinds of weak offsuit stuff. Queen 5 offsuit, not quite good enough to call, but my right on the cusp, I'm calling Queen 6 or better, and I take those janky offsuit hands, not quite good enough to call, and turn those into pre-flop 3-bet bluffs. So I go ahead and raise with my Queen 5 offsuit, and we get it through. He quickly folds. Had he bet a larger, more standard 3x size, I would have then been sort of calling with Queen 9, Queen 8, those kind of hands, and maybe using Queen 7 offsuit as the bluff and folding Queen 5. I am, and you should be as well, adjusting not just to perceived frequencies from players based on where they're opening from and what their tendencies have been so far, but also the sizing that they're using, especially out of the big blind. It seems even most important there. Lower right-hand table, raise Queen 9 first in on the button using the 44% range. The big blind calls and checks to us on Queen, Queen 5 rainbow, and I will go ahead and range bet small. Turn is the Jack of Hearts. I want to be using an overbet or check sizing on this particular card. Queen 9 kind of on the cusp. I think I can probably go ahead and overbet this one. But it's close between check back and overbet for value on the turn. I think I've got Queen 9 offsuit or better, and I've got pretty much all, maybe not Queen Deuce, but Queen 3 or Queen Deuce and better, the suited combos from the button raise first in. So I think some of those lower suited only combos like Queen 8, Queen 7, Queen 6, Queen 5, Queen 4, Queen 3, those might be in the check back line, so I can sort of under rep those trips. I'm going to be stung a bit less if I'm coolered against a better trip type hand. And I've got some board coverage for the trips in both my triple barrel line and my turn check back line. I think that's a reasonable way to break up your range on that spot. Queen 9 kind of on the cusp. It's probably solver approved. I'm probably being a bit too nitty and making it sound like it's closer than it really should be. It's probably a clear bet in solver world. I'm just not sure of that. But I think you'll do fine with it as long as you're not folding. You could bet that for value, or you could check back to under rep and bluff catch or get value in on the river. Lower left-hand table, raise Queen 9 suited from middle position using a 21% range. Lower right-hand table, rather, or raise Ace Queen suited from the cutoff using a 28% range. Lower right-hand table, the button raises 2.5x. I can defend with my suited jacks against that size and against a typical button open player, of which this guy seems to be. We've played almost 120 hands, 115 hands, a ton of orbits. He's got a very reg type stats, 22-19. Against that 3-bet from the small blind, then nothing to do but just go ahead and get out of the way. This table is really not any good anymore. It's just 3 other regs and myself. We're going to get rid of that one. Upper left-hand table, raise Ace 10 from the cutoff using a 28% range. The big blind calls in the upper left-hand table. We get the 10-4 deuce two-tone flop. He checks to me, so I'll go ahead and put in the small range bet. Lower left-hand table, a reg-type player opens the button. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet from the small blind with the ace-queen offsuit, using about a 15% range there. Pocket fives are better, all suited aces, ace-jack plus king-queen. Any two suited cards, 9 or higher, maybe 9-8 suited, something like that. Gets you to about 15%, seems like an appropriate way to play. Upper left-hand table, the rec limps under the gun. The small blind completes. I'll check in the big blind with queen 4 offsuit and check my big blind. Check range out of my big blind, rather. Everyone checks through the flop, checks to me on the turn again, so I'm going to start stabbing. Lower left-hand table, we get a new player post under the gun. In position player pops him up to from 2 to 8. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet my queens, looking to get these in pre-flop if they make me. I get called once on the turn. I'm going to follow through and not going to try to give up on my queen high. Going to keep bluffing. I do have good removal to the straight, so there's some merit to overbet bluffing that. But against a fish, a standard size is also fine. You get what appears to be a post from a new player in the cutoff, and then a player limps behind on the button. I'm going to go ahead and isolate up with the pocket queens out of the small blind on the upper left-hand table. Use about 150% of pot sizing. You have about a 13% range here. Pocket 8s are better. Any two cards, 9 or higher that are suited. You know, ace 10 plus, king jack plus. A range like that's a very reasonable range to play in this spot for an ISO. Short stack puts in about half his stack. He puts in 14 with about 17 more behind. Everyone else folds out. We have pocket queens on a 7-3 deuce two-tone board. Nothing to do but just go ahead and put the rest of the money in. He calls off. He's got ace-5. He's pretty damn live with an overcard and a gut shot, but he doesn't get there. And the flop call is just fine. The pre-flop play is, of course, atrocious. Calling for half your stack there with ace-5 off. So you either go all in or fold, and most likely fold is the correct play there. But calling is the worst. Once he gets to the flop like that, no choice but to go ahead and call off. And I played a good bit longer than I intended to, probably an extra hour or so. The tables are starting to break, so I'm going to go ahead and shut down here. But overall, the session was pretty good, especially what happened in the after-hour stretch when I stuck around and played a little bit extra time. Because that's when we got a chance to stack some recreational players, and that's what I'm here for. We get 3-bet just over 3x by an in-position player on the lower left-hand table. I can go ahead and defend for that sizing with hands like jacks, 10s, 9, 8s, maybe some suited connectors as well as ace-queen and king-queen suited. We'll call with the 8s and check range. We get a small bet, looks about 30% or so. I will check call with my pair at least once versus that sizing, and there's a great card for me on the turn, hitting that 8. I will continue checking. He goes and he bets half pot. Trying to decide if I want to check raise yet or go to the river. I don't really have a whole lot in the way of stuff that can check raise at any stretch. I think I just want to sort of play this range appropriately and just keep check calling. If he's got a hand like ace, king, or aces, he's going to be value betting the river anyway. I don't really think I'm losing too much. I will keep checking, give him a chance to try to value bet thin or bluff me if he's got air. He's thinking. Do it. He goes and he bets half pot. I'm, of course, looking to get the money in, not scared of kings full or quads fives. Ship it in. He snap calls. And he snap mucks. My eights are good. Another stack for Murph on the way out the door. I appreciate that. I get to hit and run him as a big blind came around. I'm sitting out. He had ace-king. So once that card got there on the turn, it was just a really nasty run out for him. But that's the end of the session. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, this is Charlie Murphy signing off.